Hey guys, I'm back today with my favorite reads of 2014. It's already 2015, so I'm a little bit late with this, but I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to talk about what things that I really enjoyed reading last year. I might be the last person on BookTube actually doing this, but that's okay. First, we have The Brief, Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. It follows the story of Oscar, and he has these dreams and aspirations, and beneath it all is his want to find love. He's overweight, he's nerdy, he doesn't really fit in with his stereotypical Dominican family. I'm kind of ashamed that I hadn't picked this up before. It's by a Dominican American author, and I was cracking up within the first page just reading about this guy's childhood. I get why this story wouldn't be for everyone. Oscar is really a tough character to relate to because he's pretty whiny, and he kind of whines the whole time about things that are wrong in his life without actually making strides towards bettering himself. I really enjoyed the pieces of Dominican history as told through the narration and the lens of Oscar and the narrator and through Junot. At the end, he had the most brilliant footnotes that I have ever read in my life. These were hands down the best footnotes that I've ever read. So it was really funny for me from start to finish, even though there was an element of tragedy that just went through the entire thing. And I guess you could say that it did kind of end in tragedy. But it's done with this humor, this self-awareness, and just kind of the right way to kind of pick at a stereotype. I never felt insulted. In fact, I was reading and thinking, I know someone like that. I know someone like that. So I really appreciated what Mr. Diaz did here in his book. If you saw my first video, you won't be surprised by this, but my next pick is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I'm trying to be better about holding the titles where you can actually see them and not like fiddling with them down here. BookTube lessons, you know? So I talked a little bit about this in my first video, but I really enjoyed this book. We start off the story and there's this assassin who has broken into a house, and right off the bat he has killed the mother, the father, and the sister. The baby, who is described as this kind of curious, always wanderer, manages to escape, and he crawls all the way to a graveyard. And there he's adopted by the ghosts who inhabit this graveyard, and they raise him. So we kind of follow his life growing up in a graveyard and the lessons that these graveyard inhabitants are able to teach him. It's this kind of writing that, again, it's not for everyone, but it just had these like deep life truths just communicated in such a great way because they were very simple and just being taught to this guy, to this little boy who knew only this life in the graveyard and only what he was taught by the dead and not the living. This next book was first recommended to me a couple of years ago by my good friend Sarah. She asked me if I had read this and kind of nudged me in the direction, but it wasn't until this year in Paris, where I had some downtime during my vacation, that I finally picked it up and I loved it. Basically, it's things that she had written over the years, but they're just these little snippets, little encyclopedia entries about everyday life, and she takes a word and she kind of breaks it down into how it applies to her life or a memory or one of those things where we can all go, oh, yeah, I relate to that. That's totally something that happens. I blog because I love that feeling. I love people saying, oh gosh, yeah, that happens to me all the time, or I know how you feel. And reading this book, I felt that so much with the author Amy Cross Rosenthal, where I thought, this is such a life thing. Next we have a book that I again mentioned in my first video, and that is Liesl and Poe by Lauren Oliver. Lauren Oliver and I have a love-hate relationship. I've loved some of her stuff and just absolutely did not love some of her other stuff, but Liesl and Poe is definitely on the love list. It tells the story of Liesl, who is locked away in a room by her evil, cruel stepmother, and one day a ghost appears to her, Poe, from the other side. And from there, they kind of embark on this adventure together. They break Liesl out and they go out into the world. There is a little bit of dealing with heartbreak and dealing with loss, and from what I understand, Lauren wrote this book after she suffered a loss. So a lot of that is really infused into the writing about how do you get over these things? How is it that you deal with tragedy in your everyday life? How do you move on? If you are not into middle grade books, or you think you're not into middle grade books, this would be an amazing place to start, especially if you like Lauren Oliver's other works. Next, I picked The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. I'm about to sound like a book hipster right now, but I actually picked this up right when it was released. And there's like a decent amount of hype that followed it, and I've seen a few people talking about it on BookTube. And they do the thing that they also did with We Were Liars, where they're like, you can't know anything, a big twist is coming, just don't read. And by saying that, in essence, you're spoiling people. You're telling them to put up their guard and expect a twist. So people start guessing from page one, oh, what could the twist be? What could... So you're having a different reading experience than you really have if you don't know to expect a twist, if you really are going in blindly, which is how I went into We Were Liars, and also The Girl with All the Gifts. I think that really helped the experience because I wasn't suspicious of anything. I kind of had a feeling what was going on, but I didn't know that I should be guessing. And just really, as it started being, clear that something was different, then I was like, okay, this is great. This is amazing, the way that they weave the little hints into what you were supposed to expect. I know that I'm making this worse by telling you all of this, because if you pick up this book, you're going to be trying to pick up these hints, but that's the way it goes. Next, we have The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton. It's magical realism and it is flowery, so if those things turn you off, probably not the best book for you. And the magical realism was done so well in this book, to me, because it served like a dual purpose. You took the story at face value. It's a story about a girl who was born with wings, and you follow not only her but her mother and her mother's mother, her grandmother, and kind of their struggle and different things that they go through. And you take the story at face value. Like, there is a character who turned into a bird, and there's this girl who was born with wings, and you accept these things, and you have to make the story work. But at the heart of it, you could also interpret it metaphorically and just kind of understand what it means for these people, for this girl, for instance, to be born with wings, and what it meant for her story of, struggling about being different and whatever it is that she's going through. So I like that you have the duality. I liked that, if you wanted to read it on the surface, you could, and if you wanted to ponder it and kind of dig a little deeper, you could do that as well. My last book on this list is The Enchanted by Renee Denfeld. Again, magical realism. I like to acknowledge in my reviews, obviously, like, these are all books that I love, but I like to say, like, maybe you won't like them if this, or to at least acknowledge places where it might not have been the strongest, but that worked for me might not work for other people. Just to keep, sometimes we gush about books without really understanding what makes them work or not work, or why other people might not appreciate them. So for this book, it's definitely the magical realism, and it might also be that you can connect with the characters. So this is a book that is told from the perspective of someone who is in jail, and it's kind of an omniscient point of view. He knows things that he shouldn't know, and it's not really explained how he knows it, but it really fits the tone of magical realism in this world. So it's also very dark. You're following prisoners and a woman who's investigating a case of one of the prisoners, and she kind of delves into this darkness, really. And so if those things might not be for you, or if you really need to connect to a character in order to connect to a story, then you might struggle with this one. For me, both of those aspects work so well because of the content of the book. The theme of the book, or one of the big themes, is just kind of, wanting to be seen or wanting to be forgotten. These are people who are, for the most part, forgotten, criminals. And Denfeld is very careful not to tell you exactly what their crimes are, so that you can kind of still build up a level of sympathy for them and for what their lives have kind of, devolved to, being in these cells, and what their everyday life is. It's not an easy read. It really kind of crushed me, but in the best way possible. So there you have it. Apparently the theme was a little bit of magical realism, a little bit of, depressing. Apparently I wanted to have my heart crush at all times. So we did that well in 2014. Thank you guys so much for watching, and here's to an amazing 2015.